Cops move my car without telling me. Move it to an illegal parking spot, a bus stop, where they then tow said car 2 hours later. What other blood-boiling, moronic cop stories do you have? I was at LAX picking up my parents. There are cars everywhere, so it's stop and go. An airport cop waves me over to a spot and I go over. As soon as I did it, he began writing me a ticket for parking in a loading zone. He told me to do it. Always point out to them mistakes and try to argue with common sense. My buddy got stopped for DUI, although when the cops found him, he was not in the vehicle and it was completely closed. They asked him to get in and park it in a real spot. He got in, started it, and was promptly told he was under arrest for DUI after doing what they only just told him to do. My car was parked on the street legally, in the town my college inhibits, and my car got hit so hard by another car that the force drove it up partially onto the curb. I go back to my car and there's a ticket for parking on the sidewalk, on my windshield by the campus police. I pretty much tore that police station a new one. Basically the same story. I was parked across the street, off campus, and my old van was hit during the night. Early the next morning, one of my friends told me that it had been hit. I ran out to check. It was knocked halfway out into the street. A city cop was just finishing up a ticket. I had to point out the fresh damage and pieces of another vehicle. Later determined to have been a green Chevy based on green paint left behind on the white van, and a few parts, including the rear view mirror found under my van. The cop apologized, tore up the ticket, and said he hadn't noticed debris all over the street and just assumed some drunk college kid parked it there that way. Never found the other car. I was headed over to my parents' house after work one night and got pulled over for allegedly running a stop sign. The cop asked for my license and registration, then came back to my car and asked me to step out. He gave me a sobriety test and based on that, said he had no reason to believe I was on drugs. I'm a 26-year-old male with long hair. He arrested me and took me to the hospital to get my blood drawn. I was completely cooperative the whole time because I knew I was clean. I don't do any type of drug and only drink occasionally. After waiting 6 weeks for the results from the blood test to come back, I showed up to court and got my results. Negative. The case was dropped. I found out 6 months later that this cop had done this to hundreds of people over his career and he was fired. Most of the stories on this thread make me pissed because the cops that constantly abuse their power never face any consequences, but this one is awesome. It's just a shame it took 4 years of drug tests and court costs paid by the taxpayers to get this moron finally fired. My mom and I were sitting at a busy intersection waiting to turn left. In all 4 directions, there were double left turn lanes, a single straight lane, and a single right turn lane. We were in the rightmost left turn lane, just waiting, blinker on. My mom remarked that there was a cop behind us, but neither of us thought much of it. The light turned green with the arrow, so we turned left. The cop behind us instantly flashed his lights and pulled us over. When he came up to the car, we were confused as hell. "You made an illegal turn," he said. "From the turn lane?" my mom asked. "That wasn't a turn lane, that was a straight lane. You were in the straight lane, but turned left." Mom and I just looked at each other. That was a double left turn lane, just like in all the other directions. The cop got testy. "No, it was a single left turn lane and you screwed up." I think he was starting to doubt himself a bit though, as we kept staring at him with bewilderment and looking at each other. He ended up letting my mom off with a warning. I drove back to that intersection the next day, and of course, it was a double left turn in every direction. Not sure what burr was up the cop's ass that day. At least he didn't write us a ticket. He let her off with a warning because he realized he was wrong but didn't want to admit it. My car was near a shooting. I wasn't allowed to move it because it was in the crime scene. So I ended up with a parking ticket because it was a 2-hour parking spot. Why the F did the parking authority ticket it while it was in a crime scene? I fought that one and won though. Parking authorities are not the brightest crayons, nor the sharpest bulbs. It was my birthday and I was just getting out of school. I pull out of the parking lot behind 2 buses with another bus behind me. Somehow the cop thinks I was going 40 in the 20, but the buses were doing the speed limit. So I got hit with a $350 ticket that the court refuses to lower because it was in a school zone. Too long didn't read? Stuck between school buses, cops think I was speeding, hit with huge ticket. Lawyer up, always go public, talk to the media. I was waiting outside my friend's dorm building at 2 a.m., waiting for the pizza that we ordered. Pizza guy came and gave me my pizza, and I tried to go back in the building, but the door was locked, and I didn't have an ID that could get me into the building. So I knocked on the glass door to try and get the person's attention who was on the phone inside. Then I just got tackled to the ground, and someone is yelling to calm down. I replied, okay. Then they put handcuffs on me. I was completely confused because I was drunk and I thought it was a friend who tackled me, not a cop. This cop kept screaming at me to calm down while I was just sitting on the ground not doing anything or saying anything. Then the pizza guy goes over to the cop. I saw the whole thing and this is unjustified. He started asking the cop for his badge number so he can report him for tackling and handcuffing me for no reason. Eventually, after they had a yelling battle, the cop let me go, but I lost a pizza. Cop ruined my pizza. Am I the only one here who wants to comment on how big of an outstanding individual the pizza guy was in this situation? I have not once, not twice, but 3 times almost been run over by a cop while riding my bicycle. They don't seem to think red lights or stop signs apply to them. And here is an NSFL story. Seriously, don't read this. It is not funny. It's probably not even interesting. And I'm not a good storyteller. But it feels good to get it out of my brain every so often. I was in Guatemala, on the highway heading back to the airport in Guatemala City. There are cops everywhere in Guatemala. Not the kind that pull you over for speeding, but the kind that carry huge automatic weapons that are looking for anyone involved in drug trafficking or whatever else. I don't know. Anyway, they would ride 2 cops on a tiny little motorcycle, totally unsafe. While driving our rental truck down the highway that day, one of these pairs of motorcycle cops was weaving through traffic, cut me off, and I almost hit them. My husband nervously half joked, "Oh, don't hit the cops, haha." Not 10 seconds later, the same idiot police ran into the back of a small pickup, 2 vehicles in front of us, spilled off their bike, and were run over by a large, heavy dump truck type thing. One of them survived, at least as long as we stayed there, as only his arms and legs had been flattened. The other one was not so lucky. Watching flattened legs guy crawl desperately towards his obviously very dead partner was the most gut-wrenchingly terrible thing I've ever seen. I knew this wasn't supposed to be funny, but my cousin was on a highway entrance ramp when a cop came speeding up from behind him. It looked like the cop was going to barrel right into him, so he assumed it was an emergency and pulled over to let the cop pass. Said cop immediately pulled him over and ticketed him for reckless driving. My uncle works for the city government and had a friend with access to the highway camera footage. There was a camera with a perfect view of the entrance ramp. My cousin and his friend spent a day looking over all the footage to try and find the incident. They did, took it to the court, and the cop got suspended. Justice. People forget that the local government, state, fed cameras are public property and subject to requests for information. Justice 9 months later, combined with countless hours and trips wasted dealing with the situation, is hardly justice. I just fume at things like this because I've paid countless unfair tickets and dealt with bureaucratic rubbish. I have paid a ticket I knew was unjust and wanted to fight, but it would become a game of my word against the police. The cost of time spent fighting, it would be more expensive than paying it. We were living in Hawaii and I had 4 kids in the car with me. The cops like to set up seatbelt checks and stop everyone and give out tickets for no seatbelts. I stopped for the cop standing in the middle of the road. He looked at me, my daughter in the front seat, my daughter behind me in a booster seat, my infant in the middle of the back seat in a rear-facing car seat, and he could barely see my other son sitting on the other side of the car seat. He said he wasn't wearing a seatbelt and to pull over to the side of the road. I looked back, couldn't see anything but the top of my son's head, so I pulled over, got out, and checked him. He was wearing his seatbelt, but apparently the cop couldn't see it. By the time the cops had worked their way down the long line of people they were writing tickets for, we had a different cop writing my ticket. I told him my son had been wearing his seatbelt, you just couldn't see it over the baby car seat. He started being all angry and then asked me for my license. My husband was military, and the law is that as long as you have a valid military ID, your state of record license is valid even if it is expired. The cop insisted I was wrong and that he could arrest me right then and there in front of my children if I didn't take the ticket for not having my son in a seatbelt. I took the ticket, checked the law when I got home, took my ticket to court, and got it thrown out. I had all 4 of my car tires slashed in my girlfriend's front yard one night a few years back. Chilliwack, Florida, outside of Orlando, Seminole County Sheriff. Didn't notice it until I tried to drive to class the next morning. Called the cops and they came out and did a report. The cop that came told me to leave it right where it was, on the side of a very rural, very low traffic road. Take the wheels off and bring them to get the tires replaced. That I would be fine leaving it on concrete blocks right there. So, the next day I get my roommate's pickup, drive to my girlfriend's house, put it on the blocks, and take my wheels to the used tire place like 30 minutes away. I was gone maybe 3 hours total. In that time, another cop, who was filling in for the guy from that day before, saw my car on blocks, assumed it was abandoned, and had it impounded. The best part is that, because there were no wheels on it, they broke the concrete blocks out from under it with a sledgehammer, dragged it on its undercarriage like 20 feet and up onto a flatbed. Then they dropped it on its belly in a dirt lot in the middle of a crack town. Cost me $250 to get it out of impound, and it had over $2,500 worth of damage to the steering, suspension, brakes, and bodywork. Do you think anyone cared? Nope. Poor as F college student me got screwed. There was a picture set floating around a couple of years ago showing a car, in England I think, that was legally parked on the street. The city had changed it to no parking while the couple that owned the car were on vacation. To mark no parking in whatever area this was, they painted a red line along the curb. So they brought in some kind of crane, lifted the car, painted the line, and put the car back. Then started piling the tickets on the car. I think they came back to 3,000 Great Britain pound of tickets from whatever version of the story I read. Very possibly fiction though. I've seen a cabbie stop at a yellow light. Rare. Then the cop behind him wailed on the horn until the cab ran the now red light. The cop then ran the red light behind him. No lights on or anything. I half expected the cop to pull the cab over for running the light, but didn't. I don't doubt that story for a second. You hear about bollards being built around a car whilst it's parked so no one can get back in it. I changed lanes in front of an undercover cop car. There was plenty of room, but dude proceeded to speed up and ride my ass. I sped up to change lanes and let him pass, but he continued following me till he pulled me over. I do admit I should have maintained speed rather than give in to his intimidation. Dude gave me 3 tickets and was a total prick, even when I was trying to be nice and cooperative. I found out today he was busted by his own department for DUI on duty last week. Thank you, universe. Exact same thing happened to me, minus the tickets. He did seem drunk, though. One night in college, me and some friends are pulling an all-nighter studying, and we decide to go to Wendy's at like 3 a.m. for a Frosty and 99-cent nuggets. You know, because we're poor. We don't have a big enough vehicle for everyone to go together, so we have 2 drivers. I'm with Mike in his '88 Nissan, or the close equivalent, and a couple of our other friends are with Matt in his 2000 brand new red Mustang. We go to Wendy's and eat our Frosties and are on our way back. The streets are deserted, no pun intended, and we come up to a red light where 2 lanes go straight and both cars are stopped side by side. Mike revs the tiny 4-cylinder engine in his Nissan as a joke. Matt revs his V8 beast back and we all have a good laugh. The light turns green and we drive off at a normal pace, but blue lights ensue. Can you guess what happened? If you guessed that my friend in the Mustang got arrested for drag racing, then you'd guessed right. And no, not a ticket, straight up arrested. He tried to get it dismissed, but with no luck. It's a serious crime too, and he now has to put on a job application that he was arrested before.